Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Okay, I promise I did not write that bio. It was Chat GPT. I promise. I just gave it a couple bullets. This whole from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock today is, about digital transformation and how, it often requires fundamental changes, by the utility, by their business processes. And so today, I'm sure I got a whole audience because of the title, Dirty Little Secret. I am going to talk about, metering upgrades and how some of those things have had to cause us to rethink some of the business processes and some of the things that we do as a utility. So to start out, really, I'm going to start out by really providing awareness to potential safety and performance concerns as it relates to installing smart meters, and in particular composite smart meters inside older homes. So I'm going to just cover some really 4 basic points. I'm going to talk about water meter replacement programs in general. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the legislation that has really shaped the way that we are now buying not only meters, but brass, what were brass components, could be couplings, fittings, things of that nature. I'm going to talk a little bit about electrical grounding standards and how there's been a long history of using water distribution system to ground your electrical system from your home, and just some thoughts around what to consider when putting a program together. So let's start the journey, see if this will work right here. I just want to show you this little video. Can you see the spark? Can you see the lights flicker? You see it spark again? So now how many people here have a water meter? Raise your hand. How many people have a water meter inside your home? Okay. How many people know that in some older homes, your electrical system might be grounded to your water system? Does anybody know here if your electrical system is grounded to your electrical system? Raise your hand. Okay. Is that for the 2 that raised their hand, is that the only ground on your electrical system? Do you know that? It is for you? Okay. So let's just play it again for those that may not have saw it. So, see the light flicker? And you can see it again. Now, as a side note, what's being done right now in the installation process is really you're just using a standard, anybody jump your car? That's standard car jumper cables. That's connecting to one side of the meter and then connecting to the other side of the meter, so that way when the installation technician goes and changes the meter, you have a full circuit and they're not getting electrocuted or feeling some sort of shock. Anybody here that has an inside set, or particularly the 2 that raised their hand, ever seen these kind of conditions in your own home? How about in a utility, in your customer, and if any utility folks here? Okay, so I wanted to start with the video, and I'm going to go because I've been coming to this conference for years now, and we hear a ton about how great water meter replacement programs are, and they are. And there's a ton of benefits to water meter replacement programs. You got improved accuracy. You're going from mechanical metering to composite or to static metering, so meters last longer. You're able to provide enhanced customer service, especially if you're going to tie this to an AMI system. So if you read a water meter once a month, you're going to go from 12 reads a year if you read it once a month to 34,560 reads a year. So you're going to have a ton of data that you're now going to be able to leverage. That's going to give you some advanced data collection, some operational efficiency, and it's going to support the planning of upgrades throughout your distribution system if you leverage that data correctly. And I think as an industry, we've done a great job talking about what the benefits of technology are, but also we've probably done a little bit of a poor job communicating some of the changes that need to take place to actually effectively implement these programs, whether that's data integration, whether that's field-related components. And today I'm just going to talk about this particular field component, and I'm going to really narrow the conversation to inside set metering upgrades. But even the way I think over the years we've started to communicate better to our customers, right? So you'll see really nice graphics that really make it really easy to say, hey, we're going to come replace your water meter. You're not going to have to pay for it. It's been 10 to 15 years if it's of this age. We're going to come put this smart meter in, and here are some of the benefits of this smart meter that's going to provide for you. And customers love to hear that we're innovating, just like on the electric side, where you can log in and see your usage and kind of better understand it. But then there's also some things that we run into, especially with the adoption of doing what I'll call is an end-to-end or turnkey project, really trying to convert to be able to get the benefits of AMI, to be able to do all your meters at once. So now, if you take just this electrical grounding situation, most utilities have policies or things in place that state you must provide access to the meter. There's electrical codes that say, hey, it should not be grounded to your, water distribution system. You should have a secondary grounding, into the earth or whatnot. But it really leaves utilities wondering when you run into these situations, well, what do I do with a, lower income home that may not be able to afford some of these upgrades, because now I'm removing the meter and putting it in. And I want to just kind of give a history of how we got here. So most of you that have been in the industry for a while understand that the Reduction of Lead in Drinking Water Act was signed into law in 2011. It gave utilities 3 years to really significantly reduce the amount of lead that's in certain things that are in your distribution system. That could be pipe fittings, plumbing, fixtures, water meters was included in that as well. And so you really went from you could have 8% lead in those particular devices. It went down to all the way down to 0.25. So, water meters were really one of the big components to that, and then obviously there was a ton of things, and the industry had 3 years really just to prepare for it. So around the same time, a lot of manufacturers knew that this legislation was coming into law. They knew they were going to have to change. So again, on the metering side, there were some manufacturers that said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go to a composite material. They, in particular, Census came out with a meter that was designed for the European market in 2009. They then took that technology, ported it over to the US and put it in their iPearl, and they really spend a ton of time, along with many other manufacturers, trying to create a meter that had no heavy metals, was easily recyclable, that could meet these stringent new restrictions and legislation, and would be better than bronze. So a ton of innovation happened, and what you saw was a shift in the entire space. And so if you walk around the shore, this show, you're going to see, meters from Camstrup, Badger Meter, many manufacturers. And when you look at it as a whole, we're going to talk about safety. We're going to say, hey, how is no lead? And the durability, you're going to hear about how, this engineered composite is more durable than bronze. And it's environmentally friendly. It takes literally a third of the energy to manufacture these composite meters than it did with bronze. And so it's a little bit more cost effective. It's going to solve some shipping limitations due to its weight. And so it's going to be, a lot better. And, I could also talk about other, parts of the industry that did the same thing on pipes, valves, fittings, and whatnot. So now, as you have PVC or this engineered composite, you have multiple places within your home that are no longer suitable for grounding your electrical system. And if you just look at sort of the problem, there's these electrical grounding standards. So in the US, you got the National Fire Protection Association. They're the main body that creates the NEC manual for electricity. But you also have the ICC, that's International Electrical Standards. And then if you go from state to state, you have different legislation and different rules as you navigate from one state to the other, and even from one county to the other, or one parish to the other. So really, in summary today, while there are many national organizations that try to put down, guidance, there's really not one governing body, and B, it's really up to your local authorities to make sure that these codes are enforced. So I'm going to take it back to the US for a minute, if I take the NEC manual. So they have, over the years, gradually updated their recommendations on how electrical systems should be grounded. And so in 1968, that's when they first suggested that you could ground to a water system, but you should have a separate electrode that you're also grounding as well. So pre-1968, there was no guidance that provided electricians to say you should do anything other than, ground to a distribution system. 1968 is when they started to say, hey, you should have another electrode. In 2008, they came out very specifically, and they actually tell you, how deep it should be grounded, 10 feet within the earth, whatnot. And then 2014, same thing. And even there's a little bit more guidance in terms of like how far away you need to ground from your water distribution system, right? Because you can't have it, all that close. But I can tell you today, there is no legislation that says that you can't. Even as the water industry has changed and we're not supplying all the same materials that we did in 1968, there's still no legislation. So you can see when you go into homes, you'll see, this is an example right here, when you go into certain homes that were built many years ago, where you'll have the electrical system from the panel, a grounding wire coming down, and you can see in this picture how close it is, to your water meter. And so when you as a water utility go and change out the meter, it kind of creates this, are they responsible now? What if there is no other plastic fittings or couplings in there, and I now remove the meter? There's a lot of utilities that are wrestling with this challenge, right? So what do I do if I'm removing it? Now, if you further, look at grounding to a water system, there's a section that specifically states that you should have a jumper wire. So as illustrated in this picture, you're supposed to have a wire that runs from one side of the meter to the other side of the meter. Now this has been in the NEC code for quite a number of years. So it even predates composite meters. This wasn't just to say, well, if you install a composite meter, you should have what they're calling a jumper wire. You should always have it. So the common interpretation is that if a water meter is installed, within the home, that you should have this in place. But that does not mean that every utility that has meters inside the home have these. So it creates, again, some challenges and some things that utilities really need to consider when putting a metering program together. So I just wanted to kind of take some of the guidance the manufacturers have, and really as I dug through for this presentation, I was able to find two that provided guidance, both Sensus and Badger Meter. And so Sensus in their manual for the iPro actually highlight the 2011 code, and basically a statement that in there that says, hey, the continuity and the path for grounding, you cannot solely rely on the piping or rely on water meters or any other filtering device or similar equipment to maintain that ground. So they cite that, and in their installation manual even cite to the customers who may have concerns about it by saying, hey, this is no different than if you had a bronze meter. So just because you have a composite meter now, this was the regulation. Badger Meter takes a similar approach. They do cite some AWWA policy that specifies that, you should not ground to a water distribution system, and that you should have a permanent strap or be installed within a meter setter. So that's what the guidance from the manufacturers provide. And what I'll kind of say, as I'm kind of reaching the end here, is that, there's really two things to really consider. One is, I've been kind of talking a lot about safety, and if you break that, even if you have a homeowner or kids or water meters present, and you were to touch both sides, and that was you could have a situation where you're electrocuted. But obviously the home needs to be properly grounded. So as you're thinking about these programs, this also triggers some thought process around policy. Like what policy do we already have in place, and then how are we communicating that policy to our customers so that way they're aware of it. And then the other part of it is making sure that you do have the jumper wires in place in any installation situation. And then the third that I'm not pointing out, but if you're doing your own installation, make sure you do safety, and you use tools like the car jumper wire that I showed in the previous screen to make sure that you keep your technicians safe. The other part of this is the performance of now what is a smart meter. So if you have a magnetic meter in place or other digital meters that are now collecting information digitally, having issues, having an electrified line can cause issues with the water meter. The cool thing about the data that I'm talking about, when you now have almost 35,000 data points a year, is now you can kind of see some erratic behavior. Oftentimes that erratic behavior, customers will call the support lines and say, something's wrong with the meter. And what I could tell you is that, I'm not going to say every time, but there's a lot of times that some of these grounding related issues could actually impact that performance. And then, really in closing, some of the things that I think we as thought leaders and folks that are running utilities really should think about is, when you're doing a meter replacement program. But let's talk about jumper wires. If they're inside, do you have them today? Do you use them? I can tell you a lot of times the people at the top, they're not going to know these questions. So that's kind of like in the last presentation, getting the entire group together to understand that. And then what are the requirements to install them? Because based on the city and state you live in, if your electrical system is grounded to your water distribution system, now your water distribution in your home is considered part of your electrical system, so you need an electrician to install a jumper wire, not a plumber. So it's these things that can really be kind of gotchas, and so we got to think through that. And then how are you going to communicate these to your clients and provide awareness to your customers? So, and whose responsibility is it? Are you going to put money in the budget, if you run into some of these situations? If you do have policies, how are you going to communicate them? And then really, how are you going to enforce them? Like, what's going to be the pathway? So, enforcement, communication, providing awareness is kind of in a single bucket. But like, what is the liability? I think liability conversation and concerns for utilities should think about what if any regulatory compliance is there in your local state government? And then is there some partnerships? There's a lot of local electricians, local plumbers, local businesses that I've had the opportunity to work with utilities that will forge a partnership or a relationship, so that way, their customers can get some of these things fixed. And then again, how do you communicate that through some type of notice? So I guess in closing, technology is great, and it's really through learning and really experiencing the upgrade, going through upgrades many times that really enable you to say, okay, hey, here's some, could be unintended consequences or some things that really should just be thought about. I mean, we really do look at things as all for the benefit, and I'm not saying that this is a negative. I think actually it's a positive, because making a homeowner aware that they have a safety concern, within their home, I think is a positive thing and not a negative. And so, with that said, I have 5 minutes left. So, what questions, if any, do you have for me? And if you're speaking next, you're not allowed to ask a question, because I did that to the previous folks. Yes, sir.
Are there any disadvantages to composite meters versus brass trunk meters?
So the question was, is there any disadvantages composite to bronze? I would say from a performance, no. I think it's a lot of preference. Any other questions? You guys have been an energetic group, and I appreciate you. Yes, sir.
What type of feedback have you gotten from customers once they get the new meters in place and now they have, instant access to their usage? What is their customer's response been?
So you're talking about like the end customer?
Yeah, homeowner.
Yeah, the homeowner. I think, I've spoken on that topic before. I think there's sort of mixed engagement, if you will. In many parts of the country, the water bill is not the largest bill, so I think you get a little bit more engagement on the electric side, especially in summer and looking at the usage. So, but I mean, I would say on average, I mean, it's 10 to 20% engagement on some of the the data that you're seeing. I think it definitely does drive customer service. So being able to answer customer questions and actually know like when usage happened and how it happened, I think is all really good points.
So did you, just to follow up with that, so we're in the process of swapping out.
Yes, sir.
We have about 17,000 connections, just getting started. So has the response from the homeowners been mostly positive? Hey, we like this, or has there been a transition there that's been?
I think it's mostly, I do think it's mostly positive. But I think I would say with anything, for people that like to complain, once you solve their problem, they're still going to find another way to complain. So it's one of those things where I think if you can promote the increase in service from your utility, and if you can, there's so many different avenues to do that. But it is really an enhancement to your service to be able to provide them all this additional data. I mean, to go from 12 to almost 35,000 data points, and really be able to understand where water is going and if they have a leak, is something that you've never been able to do before until AMI, especially in the water sector. So. Thank you. And then I would say communication. A lot of the portals, have ways to communicate outward, and so providing customers more robust access is important. Good question. There was another hand right here.
The electrical problem, that's only for meters in the house, not meters.
Yes and no. It's more prevalent in the house, but that does not mean that you can't, get a stray shock, by an outdoor meter set. So I don't want to give you the impression that it's not an issue, but what I will say is there's oftentimes a lot of earth between the home and the box, and a lot of that earth absorbs the electrodes. All great questions. You guys have been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.